I said like all along, like, oh, obviously Scott Laughton having a down year, just didn't look like the player from the previous 2-3 seasons that we really grew to be like, he is useful. Like,
he was on the ice for a lot of bad things this year.
He is useful. He does a lot of good. And then, like, probably post-trade deadline when we're like 2/3 of the way through the year, you look at the numbers and go, hey, you know how we were saying, okay, so the goal total isn't going to be what it was, the points total, but it's basically the exact same. Like a few fewer goals, a few more assists. He basically had the exact same scoring year as he did the year before, where it was like, well, he was second line left wing playing with Kevin Hayes. Right. Probably he's not going to be able to replicate that. He basically did. The raw scoring totals versus the rest of his on ice results. I am more than you. Obviously, more of an eye test, raw scoring totals. Like, look at the raw scoring totals. He's exactly the same. But the one thing I wanted to point out, like when you just in general have this conversation about raw scoring totals, especially for a guy who isn't going to play 20 minutes a night.
Sure.
Scott Laughton was second among Flyers forwards with over 1,700 total shifts this year.
That's interesting.
5 on 5.
I didn't know that.
Forwards. Second among forwards with over 1,700 total shifts. He scored 39 points. That leaves roughly 1,682 shifts to assess beyond just his scoring numbers. Like, and I think that's where we sometimes get into this conversation on like, well, what do the advanced numbers really tell you? Yeah, man, guy scores a goal, picks up an assist, you can go, good shift. Yeah. There's a whole lot of shifts where that doesn't happen, especially for a guy who isn't a point-a-game player, who isn't driving power play one, who isn't counted on to do all the scoring for you. Because you're like, oh, yeah, he had 5 shots on that shift. Pretty damn good shift. Like, that's not who Scott Laughton is. So you kind of have to dig below the numbers. So while the scoring was pretty much on par with what you'd expect,
it was his scoring numbers were pretty good.
The rest of the shit, maybe not so much.
That's the thing. The scoring numbers are good, especially when you account for the fact that he got significantly less minutes this year than he did last year. Like, I break it down in the article, and last season, so not this past season, but the season before, he had 18 goals and 43 points. Okay. This season just concluded 13 goals, 39 points. So a bit of a dip, but relatively in line. But then you remember that he did it in like a little over 2 fewer minutes a game. He got less minutes. He got less ice time. So really, if you're just purely looking at the scoring numbers and accounting for the fact that he wasn't used as much, you could argue this is a better offensive year for Scott Laughton. And I want to make it clear that this was not an all bad season for Laughton. I thought and this is probably when you change your tune about his season. In February, he was real good. Sean Couturier stopped doing anything, and Scott Laughton stepped up, and the Flyers survived February because the drop off that killed their season really didn't start until like early to mid-March, really like mid-March, and I think it probably would have started earlier had Laughton not picked up the slack that Couturier had left when he stopped scoring at all, because they just basically replaced Couturier in the lineup with Laughton, and for a month, Laughton did his best Couturier impression, at least from a scoring standpoint. So February, Laughton carried the load. Good for him. Also, Laughton was one of the, if not the best shorthanded scoring forwards in the NHL. Like, that didn't go away. He kept scoring a ton. He had that great combo with him and Konechny. I believe in my article, I note that over the
8
last
shorthanded points, 2 goals, 6 assists.
Yeah, and then over the last 2 seasons, no player in the NHL has more shorthanded points than Scott Laughton. Laughton has established himself as a legitimate high-end shorthanded point producer, not just for the Flyers, but on the NHL level. So those are all good things. The bad thing is that, generally speaking, bad things happened when he was on the ice. The Flyers got outshot, they got outscored, they got outchanced. They just lost all of the important battles at 5-on-5 when Laughton was on the ice. And the weird part about it is that that's not him. It would be one thing if he was always a 5-on-5 liability. But throughout his career, he's always, and I put this in the article that you can see on allphly.com, he's always graded out, if you're isolating the impact he has on his team's shot differential and his team's chance differential, compared to other NHL forwards, he's generally landed in somewhere in like the 40th to 70th percentile. Very much middle of the pack. And for a guy who plays a middle of the lineup role, that's kind of where he should be. If he was driving play to a 95th percentile level, you'd be like, well, shit. If he can produce anything offensively, damn, he could be a top 6 forward. He's not that. He never has been that. But he's always been a quality middle of the lineup impact guy where he at the very least doesn't hurt you at 5-on-5, and often he helps you. This year, though, his impact on shot differential, sub first percentile. He was like, I don't remember the exact number, but I think he was something like 347th out of like 351 forwards in terms of impact. And the impact on expected goal differential, a little bit better, but still in the first percentile. So way down at the bottom. And you're just like, where the hell did that come from? Because he's never been this bad before in terms of what he's doing to help the team at 5-on-5 and not let them be outshot and outchanced. He's never been that bad before, and he was this year, and it was surprising.
I think what's most surprising about that, now I won't say this was the Flyers' most talented team in the last few years, but it's as good a season as they've had in a little while.
Yeah, true.
Like you would think, okay, the team performing at a higher level, perhaps one of these guys, all the lines probably did better. No, not the case. And yeah, he played less, and probably a direct result of him not doing all that well when he was out there.
Definitely part of it.
Let's put him out there less.
Definitely part of it.
It's just surprising to me that the team was, from just like a night-to-night basis, better. Just eye test. I can much more easier watch them without throwing shit at the television. Like one of the guys who's been an underrated bright spot the last few years was like, oh yeah, it wasn't him.
Yeah.
It actually had nothing to do with him.
It actually had very little to do.
They're doing it in spite of him, except for on the penalty kill.
On the penalty kill, exactly. And it was a universal thing. That's what these impact stats, because they're really, the model I'm referring to is on evolvinghockey.com. It's called RAPM. And basically what it does is it tries to isolate the impact a guy is having on his teammates. And it tries its best to strip away, quality of competition, quality of line mates, zone starts, home road splits, everything like that, and just zeroes in on what his actual impact was. And the reason why Laughton grades out so poorly by a model like that, or at least he did last year, is because everyone performed worse when they played alongside Laughton. And look, yeah, maybe like a Travis Konechny is going to be better when he's away from Laughton because Konechny's significantly more talented than Scott Laughton. That makes sense. Put him, instead of putting him with Laughton, you put him with Tippett or you put him with first half Sean Couturier. And yeah, Konechny's probably going to be better away from Laughton. But then you look at someone like Nick Delorier, who we all agree, not very good at the 5-on-5 skating skill portion of the NHL hockey. Great fighter. Real fun to watch fight and beat up on Matt Rempe. That's great. But in terms of the hockeying, not the best.
Not particularly someone you love to have on the ice.
Exactly. Well, here's the thing. When Delorier was on the ice with Laughton, okay, they're line mates, and you would think Laughton can drag up Delorier because Laughton's a better player than Delorier. The Flyers collected 37% of the expected goals. Real bad. Anything below 40 is horrific. Anything below 45 is not that great. You want to be above 50. But if you're below 40, horrific. So, okay, that must mean that Delorier was the one making Laughton worse. Well, not so fast, because when Delorier was on the ice without Laughton, Delorier, the Flyers, collected 49% of the expected goals. Pretty decent.
Basically break even.
So
and
really...
you're shorthand. Like when Delorier is on the ice, you have the worst line on the ice.
Yeah. So basically... the person who was dragging down the Laughton-Delorier pairing, at least last year, was not Delorier. It was Laughton. And if you are dragging down Nick Delorier, you have to take a look in the mirror and be like, what the fuck? Because Nick Delorier, when he's not playing with Laughton, it's not like he's playing with studs. He's playing with Ryan Poehling.
No, his best teammate last year, his best line mate was... second half Sean Couturier, who could barely move.
Yeah.
He's recovering from a back injury still and has a tear in his abdomen.
Yeah. That's a good point.
That's the best player he played with last year.
Exactly.
I mean, not to disparage Garnet Hathaway or Noah Cates or anything, but Scott Laughton's 2 seasons removed from a Selke.
Yeah.
And that's the best dude.
Sean Couturier is 2 seasons removed.
Yes, that's what I meant.
Yes.
Couturier is that's the best guy he played with, someone who had a torn abdomen.
Yeah.
And better with that than Laughton, who... by the eye test, you're like, oh, he's good.
And the thing, too, is that a lot of those shifts that Delorier was taking with Laughton, he was also had the benefit of Hathaway on the other side.
Yes.
The line was Delorier, Laughton, Hathaway, and it stunk. And then you would easily just be like, oh, well, it must be Delorier. And probably was to a degree, because I think we all agree he's not the greatest player from an NHL standpoint. But Delorier wasn't that bad when he was with centers that weren't Scott Laughton, which again makes you be like, man, what the hell happened to Scott Laughton this year?
That line with Cates or Paling, like pretty good fourth line,
Pretty solid.
Now, like when it was like Cates, Paling, Hathaway, like that's a really good fourth
better.
line.
Yeah.
But like when Delorier was out there with any of those other combinations, it wasn't horrible.
Yeah.
And for some reason with Scott Laughton, like it was.